I thought my husband hated me, until I divorced him. Days later he killed himself, and left behind a secret apartment filled with portraits of me. But when I woke up I was back before the divorce. This time I swore I'd save him. Even if the world called me a gold digger, even if he pushed me away, I would fight for his love. Because now I know, my cold, distant husband has always been my greatest love. The first week after my divorce should have been a liberation. At least that's what I kept telling myself. The papers were signed, my name scratched across the dotted line in sharp black ink. And with it, I thought, the last of my ties to Nathaniel Hayes had been severed. The world disagreed. I was in the middle of a sun-drenched island vacation, sprawled across a cabana bed with a tall glass of rose, when my phone buzzed. I expected it to be another message from one of my friends. Pictures of their cocktails, updates about the yacht we were supposed to take out that evening, laughter about how free I must feel without the cold shadow of Nathaniel hanging over me. But it wasn't. Instead, my screen lit up with a news alert. Tragedy. Financial prodigy Nathaniel Hayes dies at 29. Apparent suicide. The glass nearly slipped from my hand. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating, sunstruck from the relentless heat. But the headlines kept multiplying, flooding my notifications. Each one carried the same words. Suicide, tragedy, gone too soon. I sat up straight, my breath caught in my throat. The media painted him as they always had. A genius, a legend in the making, the young man who built a billion-dollar empire from nothing but relentless willpower and a mind sharper than steel. They described him as enigmatic, private, even coldly disciplined. They spoke of his brilliance in numbers, his flawless business instincts, his reputation as the man who never lost. But behind the respectful tone, there was always that same undercurrent of pity. They alluded, almost salivating, to the accident that had left him with a prosthetic leg. They whispered about how he'd never been seen with a wife, never flaunted lovers, never appeared in public with warmth. They wondered aloud if his loneliness had driven him to this end. And in every report not one of them mentioned me. I was his wife, or had been until just a week ago. Yet to the world, Nathaniel Hayes had died a solitary tragic genius. My stomach twisted. I pressed my palm against my forehead, trying to absorb the shock. I should have felt, what? Relief? Regret? Pity? Instead, all I felt was confusion, a hollow ringing inside me, as if someone had struck a bell deep within my chest and left it vibrating endlessly. That was when the old butler arrived. Mr. Whitaker was a tall, stooped man with silver hair combed immaculately back, though time had carved deep grooves into his face. He had served the Hayes family longer than I'd been alive. Seeing him there on the sun-washed pier, dressed in his somber black suit as though the tropical heat couldn't touch him, felt wrong, out of place, ominous. Mrs. Hayes. He addressed me, still using the title even though legally it no longer belonged to me. His voice cracked slightly, though he held himself with the kind of dignity only decades of loyalty could shape. I swallowed. It's Reed now. Isabella Reed. For a heartbeat he simply looked at me, something sorrowful flickering in his eyes. Then he bowed his head. The young master left instructions. He wanted me to find you immediately should this ever come to pass. This, my throat closed. This doesn't make sense. He hated me. Why would he? The butler shook his head. No, ma'am. Quite the opposite. He handed me an envelope, thick and sealed with Nathaniel's personal crest, the Hayes family emblem pressed in wax. My fingers trembled as I broke it open. Inside was not a letter but a notarized will. My name appeared everywhere, written in Nathaniel's precise hand. The meaning struck me like lightning. Everything. He had left everything to me. Every share of Hayes Financial. Every property, every account, every last investment. A fortune so vast I wouldn't spend it in 100 lifetimes now bore my name. My knees weakened. No, there must be a mistake. Why would he? Because he loved you, Mr. Whitaker said gently. The words were a blade. I actually laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. Loved me? Nathaniel Hayes didn't even live with me. He barely spoke to me. Do you know what he said the day we registered our marriage? The money's been transferred. Those were his first words to me as a husband. The butler's eyes softened with something dangerously close to pity. You didn't know him as I did, Miss Reed. You didn't see him when the mask slipped. He never hated you. In truth, that year of marriage, it was the happiest of his life. My breath hitched. No. He didn't argue. Instead he said, "If you would allow me, ma'am, I'd like to show you something." We drove in silence. The island breeze faded into the drone of city streets as the car carried us away from my hollow celebration of freedom. At last Mr. Whitaker stopped before a modest building not far from my old high school. "This apartment," he said, "was the young master's sanctuary. He never spoke of it to anyone. But he left instructions that you should see it." My steps faltered as I followed him inside. The moment the door opened, the air caught in my throat. On the wall hung a massive oil painting, me in a wedding dress I had never worn. We had never held a wedding. I had never even tried on such a gown. But there I was on canvas, radiant, smiling as though happiness had belonged to me all along. Every shimmer of the fabric, every glint of imagined jewels, every soft curl of my hair had been painted with painstaking devotion. At the bottom his signature gleamed, Nathaniel Hayes. And beneath it in smaller handwriting, "Hope Isabella stays happy forever." I couldn't breathe. The apartment stretched no more than 1,000 square feet, but every inch of it screamed my name. Photographs of me at school functions. A program from the piano recital I'd played in years ago. A poorly made doll I'd once crafted in a class project, now preserved behind glass as though it were priceless. I stumbled toward a shelf where a framed photo sat. My high school graduation. There I was at the podium giving my speech as top student. In the crowd, half hidden, a younger Nathaniel stared up at me, phone lifted to snap a picture. His lips were pressed in a shy, almost nervous smile. Memories I had long buried rose unbidden. The fleeting sense of eyes following me in the halls. The quiet boy who never spoke but always seemed nearby. I turned slowly, my gaze sweeping over the relics of my own life, collected obsessively, lovingly. It felt as though I had stepped into the shrine of a stranger, and yet it was mine. Every endorsement poster from my acting career. Every product I had modeled for. Every character I had played. All catalogued here as though Nathaniel had tried to preserve every fragment of me. The realization hit like a tidal wave. He had loved me. Quietly, fiercely, in a way I had been too blind to see. But then why had he once snapped at me, "Don't let anyone know I married you. It doesn't matter." Why had he sounded so disdainful, as if marrying me had been a burden forced upon him? I remembered the humiliation of our beginning. My family had been sinking, debts dragging us under. Nathaniel's proposal had come as salvation, cold, transactional. A wire transfer. A penthouse I had never dared to step into. A husband who never came home. I had smiled back then, masking my hurt. "You're very generous, Mr. Hayes. Pleasure doing business with you." Now, faced with these walls lined with his devotion, the memory twisted cruelly. Had I been wrong all along? My hand pressed against the canvas of the wedding painting. The world spun. The edges of my vision darkened. And then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the apartment. I wasn't on the island. Loud music blasted around me, bass vibrating against my ribs. My head throbbed, my senses scrambled. A pair of arms yanked me into a hug. "Isabella finally divorced that bastard Hayes," someone shouted over the music. "Cheers to freedom." The crowd erupted. Glasses clinked. Champagne spilled. They were celebrating my divorce. A cold shock ran through me. This wasn't the present. This wasn't after his death. I was back. Back to the very night of my divorce party. Back before Nathaniel Hayes would end his life. Back with a chance to change everything. The throb of bass rattled my bones. Lights spun overhead, blinding in their brightness. For a disorienting second I thought I was trapped in some fever dream. Then I heard the words again, harsh, drunken voices raised in cheer. "To Isabella Reed. Free at last from that crippled bastard, Nathaniel Hayes." Laughter. Glasses crashing together. Applause that rang in my ears like gunfire. My body went cold. This wasn't the island. This wasn't after Nathaniel's death. I was back. Back at the same club my so-called friends had rented out the night I filed the divorce papers. Back before the headlines, before the butler's revelation, before I saw the shrine of my life hidden in that tiny apartment. I gripped the edge of the table, nails digging into the wood as bile rose in my throat. My stomach churned at the sight of them. The people who had once called themselves my circle, my confidants. Now I saw them for what they were. vultures drunk on champagne and the scent of my supposed freedom. A voice slurred near my ear. Come on, I say, loosen up. We're celebrating. Don't tell me you're still thinking about him. I turned sharply, my eyes blazing. The young woman recoiled, startled, and for once I didn't bother to mask my disdain. Nathaniel wasn't dead. Not yet. And this time I wasn't going to let him die. I shoved my chair back and stood. Stop it, I snapped, my voice cutting through the music like glass. The chatter dulled, a few uneasy laughs rippling through the crowd. I say, what's wrong? Someone asked, feigning innocence. We're just... Don't, I hissed. My fists clenched. Don't call him that. Don't speak his name with your poisoned tongues. Nathaniel Hayes is my husband and I won't hear another word against him. The silence that followed was deafening. Dozens of eyes stared at me, wide and confused. They thought I'd gone mad. After all, wasn't I the one who had initiated the divorce? Wasn't I the one who had smiled, signed, and walked away? But they didn't know. They couldn't know. Someone muttered under their breath, she's drunk. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. None of it mattered. I strode out of the club, the sound of their whispers trailing behind me, every step fueled by the desperate pounding of my heart. I needed to find Nathaniel. The city was alive with its usual night chaos, headlights streaking like comets, laughter spilling from rooftop bars, the faint smell of gasoline and fried food mingling in the air. I pulled my coat tighter around me, scanning the street until I spotted the glittering lights of the Grand Marquette Hotel. That was where the banquet was being held. I remembered it now with terrifying clarity. The night Nathaniel had fought for an international contract. The night the shark circled him, waiting for him to show weakness. And I had abandoned him, too busy drowning myself in cheap liquor and false friendships. Not this time. I hurried inside, the marble lobby gleaming under chandeliers, my heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. The banquet hall doors loomed ahead. From within I heard the rise and fall of laughter, the low murmur of business talk, the clinking of glasses. I pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The room was a sea of tuxedos and gowns, every guest a predator in silk. At the far end near the stage I spotted him immediately. Nathaniel Hayes. Even in a crowd he was impossible to miss. Tall, sharp-featured, his dark hair slicked back to reveal a flawless forehead. His tailored suit fit like armor, each line precise, unyielding. He leaned lightly on the black and gold cane that had become part of his silhouette, his expression cold as marble. My chest constricted. He was alive. I had to stop myself from running to him, from throwing my arms around him, from sobbing into his chest. Instead, I forced myself to walk calmly through the crowd, though my every nerve screamed with urgency. Halfway across the room I froze. Two men stood near the buffet table, their voices carrying just enough for me to hear. That Hayes guy again. Snatched another contract right out from under us. Please. What else does he have to live for? No wife, no kids. Probably no use below the waist either after that accident. Laughter. Cutting. My blood boiled. I stepped forward, my heels striking hard against the floor. Say that again. The men startled, glancing at me. Recognition dawned. Isn't that Isabella Reed? The actress. Not Reed, I corrected, my voice steady, cold. Hayes. Isabella Hayes. Nathaniel's wife. The words hung heavy in the air. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. The two men sneered. Funny, I heard you divorced him. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. You heard wrong. I'm standing here now, aren't I? Beside my husband. And let me be very clear. My voice sharpened, slicing through the crowd. Anyone who dares insult him insults me. And I will not tolerate it. Whispers spread like wildfire. Eyes flicked toward Nathaniel, calculating, reassessing. I walked the final steps to his side, my hand sliding naturally around his arm. His body stiffened instantly at the contact. Isabella, he said, his voice low, strained. What are you doing here? My throat tightened. The urge to say everything, I know you loved me, I know what I didn't see, I know how this ends, nearly overwhelmed me. But not here. Not now. I lifted my chin. Supporting my husband. At that moment the host appeared, microphone in hand. Mr. Hayes, what an honor to have you here. And this lovely lady beside you. Care to introduce her? A dangerous silence fell. Every competitor in the room watched with predatory glee, waiting for him to stumble. Nathaniel's reputation was flawless, but rumors of his coldness had long circulated. If he faltered now, if he appeared unstable, it could cost him everything. I squeezed his arm and stepped forward with a smile. In fluent French I said, "Bonsoir. Je suis Isabella Hayes, his wife." The host blinked, then beamed. "Ah, magnifique." The tide shifted. Suddenly people weren't whispering doubts. They were congratulating, praising, toasting. "A family man," they said. "Responsible, trustworthy. No wonder he's such a success." I smiled through it all, answering every question with practiced ease, painting the portrait of a devoted wife. And beside me, Nathaniel remained silent, his jaw tight, his knuckles white around his cane. But when I glanced at him just for a second, I caught it, the faintest flicker of something in his eyes. Not surprise. Not irritation. Something closer to fear. Fear of hope. By the end of the night, my throat was raw from smiling, my head spinning from champagne. Yet I clung to him like a lifeline, unwilling to let go. Because this time I knew the truth. Nathaniel Hayes wasn't my enemy. He was the man who had loved me silently, desperately, until it destroyed him. And this time I would save him, even if it meant tearing down the world. The Maybach's leather seats cradled me in decadent comfort, but my head was spinning. The champagne had hit harder than I realized, warmth flooding my limbs until I was little more than a bundle of giddy nerves pressed against Nathaniel Hayes's side. I clung to his arm like a lifeline, ignoring the stiffness in his shoulders, the way his gaze stayed fixed out the window as the city lights streamed past. "You're warm," I murmured, pressing my cheek against his sleeve. Like a fireplace. "Did you know that? You're very comfortable." "Isabella." His voice was a warning, low and taut, but I only laughed softly. "Don't be so cold, husband. You'll scare people." I tilted my head, studying his profile. The sharp jawline, the proud nose, the lips pressed so tightly together they formed a single hard line. "You looked very handsome tonight." That startled him. Just a flicker, but enough. His hand tightened imperceptibly on the head of his cane, and his eyes darted toward me before quickly returning to the blur of headlights outside. "Stop it," he said finally. "You've had too much to drink." "Maybe," I admitted, smiling. "But drunk words are honest words, aren't they? I never told you before, but I think I always liked you, Nathaniel Hayes." The car jolted to a stop outside the villa he had bought for me, the one he'd never stayed in, never touched except to sign the deed. He didn't answer my confession. Instead, he stepped out stiffly, his cane striking the pavement, and opened the door for me with perfect practiced courtesy. I nearly tumbled out, my legs unsteady, but his arm caught me before I could fall. My fingers clutched his lapel. The faint scent of cedar and something sharper, expensive cologne, filled my nose. Without thinking, I tugged at his tie, pulling him down closer, my gaze fixed on his mouth. His lips were fuller than I remembered, glistening faintly in the dim light. "Sweet," I whispered, licking my own lips. "I want to taste something sweet." His entire body froze. His ears reddened, color rushing to his cheeks and throat. But just as I tilted my face up, ready to press my mouth to his, a sharp vibration cut through the moment. My phone. It lit up on the seat, the screen glowing with a new message. "Ethan Cole, weren't you supposed to be celebrating your divorce tonight? Why'd you leave early? I'm trying to get that East River land deal. Can you sneak a look at the cripple's bidding documents for me? If not, maybe just don't finalize the divorce yet. Do it for me." The world tilted. Nathaniel's gaze had followed mine. He read the entire message, his dark eyes raking over every poisonous word. His hand trembled on his cane. When he turned to me, his expression wasn't cold anymore. It was raw. "Everything you did tonight." His voice cracked, breaking apart on the edges. "Standing by me, calling yourself my wife, smiling, drinking, clinging to me. Was it all for him?" The blood drained from my face. "No," I whispered. His chest rose and fell, ragged, uncontrolled. His eyes, those guarded, unreadable eyes, now brimmed with something I had never seen before. "Pain. You kissed me," he said hoarsely. "You told the world you were mine. Was it all just to buy time for Ethan Cole? To get him what he wanted?" My mind scrambled for words, but the champagne clouded my thoughts. Nathaniel's lashes lowered, trembling. "I should have known." "No," My hands shot out, gripping his sleeve desperately. Nathaniel, listen. But he pulled away, shutting himself down, his features hardening like stone. As long as we don't get divorced, you can have whatever you want. The words chilled me. He thought he was bargaining with me. That keeping him alive, keeping him by my side was just another transaction. I shook my head fiercely. I don't want land deals. I don't want favors. I want you, Nathaniel. He didn't answer. Later, inside the villa, he busied himself in the kitchen, his back turned as he stirred something in a pot. Hangover soup, he said curtly. Eat then rest. I'll have Whitaker drive you home. I don't want to go home, I said stubbornly. He didn't look at me. About the kiss, he added, his tone clipped. I know you mistook me for someone else. Don't worry. I won't misunderstand. My chest ached so sharply I could barely breathe. Mistook him? As if I could mistake anyone else for Nathaniel. As if I hadn't seen with my own eyes the shrine of devotion he'd built for me in another lifetime. I marched forward, grabbed my phone from the counter, and without hesitation opened Ethan Cole's contact. Under Nathaniel's gaze I deleted it. Blocked him. Erased every message. Then I looked up, meeting Nathaniel's stunned expression head-on. You're the one I like, Nathaniel Hayes, I said firmly. He blinked, his lips parting slightly as though I'd spoken a foreign language. You don't believe me, I accused softly. He said nothing. His hand tightened on the ladle until his knuckles turned white. That's enough, he muttered finally. I saw the messages. I know what I am to you. You hate me. But when you lie, his voice broke, trembling. When you lie, it still hurts. His eyes glistened, lashes trembling. For the first time I saw tears in Nathaniel Hayes's eyes. Something inside me snapped. I crossed the space between us, grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him down to my level. You idiot, I said fiercely. You're the one I like. Not Ethan. Not anyone else. Just you. His cane clattered softly as he steadied himself. He looked at me, startled, disbelieving, as if I were offering him the cruelest illusion. And in that moment I realized the truth. Nathaniel Hayes had never lacked money, power, or brilliance. What he lacked was the courage to believe he could be loved. And this time I was going to prove it to him, no matter how many times I had to say it, no matter how many walls he put up between us. Because if I didn't, I knew where this road would end. And I refused to let him die again. 2 days after the banquet, I showed up at Nathaniel's estate unannounced. The Hayes estate was vast, a sprawling property tucked against the hills overlooking the city, surrounded by iron gates and manicured gardens. The air here was always quiet, heavy with the kind of wealth that insulated itself from the world. I walked through the grand front doors like I belonged there. Mr. Whitaker, the butler, met me in the foyer. His polished shoes clicked against marble as he approached, his face carefully neutral. But the faint tremor in his hands betrayed surprise. Mrs. Hayes, he greeted cautiously, still clinging to the title. The young master isn't expecting visitors. That's fine, I said brightly, shrugging off my coat. I'm not a visitor. I'm moving in. The poor man nearly dropped the silver tray he was carrying. Moving, his throat caught. Moving in. Yes. I marched past him, my heels clicking like gunfire against marble. Where's his room? I'll start packing. Packing. His things, of course. I'll bring them to my place. Before he could stop me, I headed up the sweeping staircase, my hand trailing along the polished mahogany banister. Each step echoed like a declaration. I wasn't going to tiptoe around Nathaniel anymore. I found his bedroom at the end of the hall. Predictably, it was immaculate, minimalist to the point of sterility. A large bed neatly made. A wardrobe lined with perfectly pressed suits. A desk stacked with contracts, all aligned at precise angles. It felt less like a home and more like a hotel suite. I didn't hesitate. I strode in, yanked open the wardrobe and started pulling his ties from their racks. Mr. Whitaker appeared in the doorway, pale and flustered. Ma'am, with all due respect. Objection overruled, I said crisply, tossing a handful of cufflinks into an open suitcase. Pack faster, Mr. Whitaker. We don't have all day. To my eternal amusement, the butler actually obeyed. Perhaps he'd been waiting for anyone to disrupt the young master's lonely order. With surprising efficiency, he began folding shirts and stacking them neatly into the case. Take that one too, I said, pointing to a navy silk tie. Nathaniel looks especially handsome in that color. I want it. Mr. Whitaker coughed lightly into his hand, but I didn't miss the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. By the time Nathaniel returned from a meeting, half his belongings were neatly packed and waiting by the door. He froze in the threshold, his cane tapping once against the floor as his gaze swept over the scene, me sitting cross-legged on his bed, flipping through one of his books, and Mr. Whitaker standing guiltily beside a suitcase bulging with ties and shirts. His voice was low, dangerous. What is going on here? I looked up innocently. Packing. For what? For your move. You're coming to live with me. The silence stretched, thick enough to choke on. Nathaniel's jaw worked once, twice, as though he were trying to grind down words sharp enough to cut me with. Finally he said flatly, "No." "Yes," I countered. He tightened his grip on his cane, eyes narrowing. "Isabella." I hopped off the bed, crossed the room and planted myself directly in front of him, hands on my hips. "Nathaniel Hayes, we've been married a year and you've never once stayed in the home you bought me. That changes now. Starting tonight you're living with me." "I don't agree." "Too bad." I smiled sweetly. It wasn't a question. His chest rose sharply, his nostrils flaring. "Why?" "Because I said so." "That's not an answer." I softened just slightly. "Because I want to see you when I wake up. Because I want to eat breakfast with you. Because I want us to come home together at the end of the day. Isn't that what normal married couples do?" For the first time Nathaniel looked shaken. His eyes flickered, uncertainty breaking through his carefully built mask. He lowered his gaze, voice almost inaudible. "You're exchanging this for the East River project, aren't you? If I move in with you and agree not to divorce, what else do you want from me?" The words cut me deeper than I expected. For him, love could only ever be a transaction. Affection was a currency, intimacy a bargain. I reached out, touched his sleeve gently. "Nathaniel, all I want is for you to live." He flinched as though my touch burned. That night I overheard him in the hallway. I had gone to find an extra blanket when I paused near the butler's study. Voices carried through the half-open door. "Young master," Mr. Whitaker was saying softly, "I think she truly likes you. Don't be afraid to show her a little warmth in return." Nathaniel's voice was quieter, frayed at the edges. "She doesn't like me. She just needs me. She has someone she really loves." I used shameful tactics to force her to stay by my side. Pause. Then bitter laughter. "No one will ever love me. Not really. Not when they see my leg. Not when they see what's left of me." The butler said nothing. Perhaps there was nothing he could say. I pressed a hand to my chest, tears stinging my eyes. So that was it. Beneath the icy exterior, beneath the brilliance and arrogance, Nathaniel Hayes was nothing more than a man terrified of being unwanted. A man so certain of his unworthiness that even love, handed to him freely, would feel like a trick. Well, I would just have to prove him wrong. The first night he stayed in my villa, Nathaniel chose the guest room. Predictable. I didn't push. Not yet. But the next morning I barged in before sunrise, yanked open the curtains and chirped, "Good morning, husband. Time for breakfast." He blinked blearily from the bed, hair mussed, one arm draped across his forehead. He looked younger like that, almost boyish. "Get out," he muttered. "Not a chance." I set a tray on the nightstand, toast, eggs, coffee. "Eat. We're starting a new routine." And so it began. We fell into a strange rhythm, half domestic bliss, half battlefield. He worked from my study instead of his office, papers spread across the desk while I rehearsed scripts in the living room. At night we sometimes ate together, tense silences at first, but slowly broken by tentative conversation. He still refused to join me in the master bedroom. Fine. I simply snuck into his room instead, curling up on his couch with a blanket and declaring it my new sleeping spot. He protested, of course. "This is absurd." I grinned. "Get used to it." Every day I chipped away at his walls. Small touches, casual words, stolen smiles. Every day I watched the cracks appear. Because no matter how fiercely Nathaniel Hayes tried to pretend otherwise, he wanted this. He wanted me. And I was never letting him go again. The first week of living together was a battlefield fought in silence. Nathaniel moved through my villa like a ghost, always impeccably dressed, always polite, always careful to keep distance between us. At meals he spoke little. At night he disappeared into the guest room without a word. If not for the subtle traces, a second coffee cup in the sink, the faint sound of his voice on late-night calls, the weight of his cane tapping softly down the hall, I might have wondered if I'd imagined him altogether. But I was stubborn. I wasn't letting him retreat. One evening, after another quiet dinner, I followed him into the hallway. "Nathaniel," I called softly. He paused, his back rigid. "Stay in my room tonight." His shoulders stiffened. He didn't turn around. No. I crossed the space, stepping into his shadow, my voice steady. "You're my husband. We've been married a year and we've never once shared a bed. Don't you think that's strange?" His knuckles whitened around the cane. "We don't need to pretend." "I'm not pretending." At that he finally turned, eyes sharp with a mix of anger and something more fragile, fear. "You don't know what you're asking," he said. "Then show me," I challenged. For a long moment he just stared at me, breathing hard. Then, with a bitterness that tore at me, he murmured, "You'll regret it." He came to my room that night, but he stood frozen at the threshold as if the very air inside was dangerous. I waited, sitting on the edge of the bed, heart hammering. Slowly he entered, closing the door behind him. His movements were stiff, deliberate, as though each step required an effort of will. When he reached me, he sat at the farthest corner of the mattress, his back straight, his cane resting against the nightstand. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Why this sudden change, Isabella?" I wanted to tell him everything. About the other life, about the shrine, about the truth I had been too blind to see. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead I reached out, covering his hand with mine. "Because I don't want to waste any more time." His hand twitched under mine, but he didn't pull away. "I don't care what you think of yourself," I whispered. "I only care about you being here. With me." A shudder ran through him. He pulled his hand free, standing abruptly. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." His jaw clenched. For a long moment he stood motionless. Then, with visible effort, he reached down and unfastened the prosthetic. The sound of metal releasing echoed like a gunshot in the silence. He lowered himself back onto the bed, his pant leg falling limp around the absence where his leg had once been. "Look," he said harshly. His voice trembled. "This is what I am. This is why you shouldn't have to be here. Why you shouldn't have to pretend to want me. Go on, say it. Say you're disgusted." My throat tightened painfully. He had closed his eyes, lashes trembling, bracing for rejection as if it were inevitable. I leaned forward, my lips brushing the skin where his leg ended, my tears soaking into him. "Nathaniel," I whispered. "Does it hurt?" His eyes flew open, shock shattering his composure. I looked up, meeting his gaze, letting him see the truth in mine. "I'm not disgusted. I'm not afraid. I love all of you. Do you understand? All of you." For a moment he looked utterly lost, as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. Then something inside him broke, not in pain but in release. His hand cupped the back of my head, pulling me against him, his breath ragged. And for the first time, Nathaniel Hayes let himself be held. That night the walls between us cracked open. He kissed me like a drowning man desperate for air, every touch searing, every shiver betraying years of restraint. His body trembled beneath mine, not from weakness, but from the sheer force of emotions he could no longer contain. When exhaustion finally claimed him, he lay with his head buried against my shoulder, his breathing uneven. In the quiet he began to speak. "I was 6 when I realized my parents didn't want me," he said, his voice low. My arms tightened around him. "They had me for the merger. 2 families, 2 legacies. A perfect arrangement. But once my brother was born, I became irrelevant. An accessory." He laughed bitterly, though there was no humor in the sound. "After the accident, I wasn't even that. I was a reminder. A flaw they couldn't erase." I stroked his hair gently, my heart aching. "I worked because it was all I had left. Success, money, power. Those things can't leave you. People can. Family can. Love can. But numbers? Contracts? They don't betray." He fell silent, his hand clutching mine tightly, almost desperately. "But when you asked me to marry you—" "I didn't ask," I interrupted softly. "You offered." His lips twisted. "No. I bought you." I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "And what if I told you I never cared about the money? That the only thing I wanted was you. He looked at me as if I had spoken madness. I wouldn't believe you. Then I'll prove it, I said fiercely. Day by day. As long as it takes. Tears brimmed in his eyes again, but this time he didn't hide them. He buried his face in my shoulder, his body shaking as though my promise was too heavy to bear. I held him through it all, whispering again and again, I won't leave you. Not this time. Not ever. In the days that followed, something shifted between us. He still carried his walls, but there were cracks now, cracks that let me slip through. He let me hold his hand during breakfast. He let me steal kisses between meetings. He let me curl against him on the couch while he worked, my presence a quiet anchor in the storm of his thoughts. He was still Nathaniel Hayes, the brilliant, cold prodigy the world admired from afar. But in our home he was simply Nathaniel, a man learning slowly, painfully to believe he was worthy of love. And I would spend every breath proving it to him. The morning began quietly. Too quietly. Nathaniel was already in the study, buried in reports. I padded down the stairs barefoot, hair unbrushed, wearing his shirt from the night before. For once I felt at peace. We had spent weeks breaking down the walls between us, and though Nathaniel still struggled to believe me, I could feel it. The small shifts, the subtle softening. Then my phone buzzed. At first I thought nothing of it. Another work reminder. A script revision. An agent's note. But when I opened the screen, the world tilted. Hashtag Emma Reed married was trending. Except they weren't calling me Emma Reed anymore. They had dug deeper. They had found out the truth. The photos were grainy but damning. Me clinging to Nathaniel at the banquet, my hand hooked firmly around his arm. His distinctive black and gold cane was visible in the shot, undeniable proof of his identity. The captions were vicious. Gold digger actress hooks disabled billionaire. Isabella Reed's career move, from soap starlet to trophy wife. He's 20 years older and broken, but hey, money talks. Hundreds of comments flooded beneath the posts. She'll do anything for fame. No wonder she got cast in director Song's new film. Pillow resources at their finest. Marrying a cripple for money? Absolutely disgusting. My stomach twisted. This was the world I knew too well. The moment the public sensed weakness, they pounced, ripping flesh from bone with gleeful cruelty. I had endured scandals before, whispers of affairs, malicious rumors. But this was different. This was Nathaniel. I slammed the phone down on the counter, my heart pounding. Across the room, Nathaniel appeared in the doorway. He had come silently, but the look on his face told me he had already seen the news. His phone was clutched in one hand, his knuckles white. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. The words stunned me. What? I should have protected you from this, he continued, his voice low, ragged. I never meant to drag you into my world. Now they'll destroy your career. They'll... Stop. I crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing his wrist. Don't you dare apologize. His eyes searched mine, dark with torment. Isabella. They're wrong, I cut in. They don't get to define us. Not you, not me, not what we are. And I'm not hiding. You don't understand. His grip on the cane tightened until his hand trembled. The more you stand with me, the more they'll attack you. You'll lose everything you've worked for. Then let them try. Before he could argue, I picked up my phone again, opened Weibo and typed a single line. Original photo confirmed. Attached was a picture, one I had taken weeks ago, of Nathaniel reading in my living room. No filters. No editing. Just him, sharp features bathed in sunlight, eyes lowered in quiet concentration. I hit post. Within seconds the internet exploded. Some comments turned uglier. So it's true. She married him. She could have had anyone and she chose this cripple? Pathetic. Isabella Reed is finished. Blacklist her. But others surprised me. Oh my God, her husband is gorgeous. I thought he was supposed to be old. He looks younger than half the idols out there. Marry rich, marry hot. Honestly, she's living my dream. Cripple or not, if he looks like that, sign me up. I couldn't help it. Laughter bubbled from my throat. Nathaniel stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. What? I shoved the phone into his hands. Look, my fans love you. They think you're handsome. They think we look perfect together. He scanned the comments, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and bewilderment. When his gaze lifted, I saw it. the faintest curve of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Can you screenshot those?" he asked suddenly, his voice soft. "Why?" "I want to send them gifts." I laughed. "There are thousands of comments, Nathaniel. You can't possibly." "I'm rich," he said simply. "I'll send them anyway." For the first time in days I saw him smile without restraint. The storm raged for a week. Articles dissected every detail of our relationship. Some claimed I had trapped him with pregnancy. Others speculated he had bought me as a plaything. The tabloids feasted on it, painting lurid headlines to sell clicks. But every time they tried to tear us down, I countered with truth. Yes, we were married. Yes, we loved each other. No, I wasn't ashamed. Slowly the tide began to turn. An old fan dug up a Weibo account. Anonymous but familiar. It was a super fan account that had existed since my debut. At first, everyone thought it was just another obsessive follower. But the evidence piled up. The account had access to events no one else attended, photos no one else could have taken. The comments, though playful, carried a distinct voice. And then the truth hit. The account belonged to Nathaniel Hayes. Fans went wild. This cold Seo was a secret fangirl all along? He built her fan club infrastructure, paid for events, organized everything. I'm crying. He loved her from the start. When I saw the posts, my chest tightened until tears pricked my eyes. All those years when I thought he didn't care, he had been my shadow. My silent protector. My #1 fan. I turned to him that night, finding him in the study working late as always. "You," I said softly, "are ridiculous." He looked up startled. "What now?" "You built my fan club." His ears turned red. He glanced down, shuffling papers unnecessarily. "That was a long time ago. Don't downplay it." I walked over, perching on the edge of his desk. "Do you have any idea how much that means to me?" He muttered something inaudible, avoiding my gaze. I leaned down, brushing my lips against his cheek. "Thank you," I whispered. For once he didn't argue. He just closed his eyes, exhaling slowly, and let me hold him. By the end of the month the narrative had shifted. The tabloids grew quieter. The fans grew louder, rallying in defense of us. They called it a love story. A fairy tale. A miracle. But I knew better. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, painful, fragile, and it was real. As I curled against Nathaniel that night, his arm finally relaxed around my waist, I knew the storm hadn't destroyed us. It had made us stronger. The storm outside had finally quieted. For weeks, the tabloids had raged, my name paired with Nathaniel's in every ugly headline. Yet in the quiet aftermath, when the online world began shifting from suspicion to admiration, I found myself facing a new silence, the kind that settles when there's nothing left to hide. And Nathaniel was terrified of silence. I learned that one evening when I wandered into the study and found him staring at his laptop, unmoving. The screen displayed a Weibo account, the same superfan page that fans had exposed. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but he hadn't typed a word. "You didn't delete it," I murmured from the doorway. His shoulders stiffened. He closed the laptop with a snap. "It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me." He finally looked up. His eyes were unreadable, dark as the ocean at midnight. "You think it's amusing, don't you? The great Nathaniel Hayes, billionaire CEO, reduced to a pathetic fanboy scribbling about his wife on the internet." I crossed the room, perching on the edge of his desk. "I think it's beautiful." His jaw tightened. "Don't mock me." "I'm not mocking you." I leaned in, catching his gaze. "I'm saying it's the purest thing I've ever seen. You loved me in silence, even when I thought you despised me." His breath hitched, but he turned away, retreating into the familiar armor of indifference. "Tell me," I said softly. "Tell me everything, Nathaniel. From the beginning." For a long time he was silent. Then slowly he began to speak. "He was 12 when his parents stopped pretending. They had me for the merger," he said flatly, staring into the distance. "Hayes and Lockwood families. A perfect arrangement. But once my brother was born, I became disposable. An inconvenient reminder that they had already fulfilled their contract." His hands clenched on the armrest of his chair. "After the accident, it was worse. They couldn't bear to look at me. My mother cried in secret. My father threw himself into work. I wasn't a son anymore. I was a flaw. I reached for his hand but he pulled it away. Not in rejection, in shame. I threw myself into numbers, into building things because at least numbers didn't lie. They didn't look at me with pity. They didn't ask why I was broken. His voice grew rougher. But then I saw you. My breath caught. It was at your school recital, he said quietly. You wore a white dress. You played piano like the world belonged to you. And for the first time I wanted something. Someone. My heart twisted. After that I started collecting, he admitted, his voice low. Flyers, photos, anything with your name. I told myself it was ridiculous but I couldn't stop. You were light. And his throat closed. I was nothing but shadow. I blinked hard, my vision blurring. Nathaniel. When you agreed to marry me I thought it was a lie. I thought you had been forced like I forced myself on you. So I told myself distance was safer. That if I kept you at arm's length at least you wouldn't have to see the truth and hate me for it. He laughed bitterly. But I was greedy. I wanted to keep you anyway. Even if it meant you'd never smile at me. Even if it meant I'd die with the truth locked in my chest. Tears blurred my sight. I grabbed his face between my palms, forcing him to look at me. You fool, I whispered, my voice shaking. All that time and you never realized I wanted you too. His eyes widened, disbelief etched into every line of his face. I remember you at graduation, I said fiercely. A boy in the crowd staring at me like I hung the moon. I thought I imagined it. I thought, why would someone like him look at me? But it was real, wasn't it? It was you. His lips trembled. I said yes to our marriage the moment I saw your photo, I continued, my tears spilling freely. I drove past your company once just to see you in person to make sure you weren't too good to be true. And you weren't. You were exactly what I wanted. The silence between us cracked. Nathaniel's hands finally lifted, trembling as they cupped my face. Say it again, he whispered, desperate, broken. I wanted you, I said. I still want you. Always. For the first time he let go. His forehead pressed against mine, his breath ragged, his walls collapsing under the weight of truth. And in that moment I felt it, the shift. This wasn't a man who believed he was unworthy. Not anymore. This was a man daring just barely to hope. That night, we lay tangled in each other's arms, the storm outside long forgotten. Nathaniel's voice was soft in the dark. Do you think it's possible? That someone like me could really be loved? I kissed the hollow of his throat, my lips lingering against his pulse. It's not possible. It's inevitable. Because I already do. His chest shook with a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. And for the first time Nathaniel Hayes, the boy who grew up unloved, the man who built walls of steel around his heart, began to believe. The garden was alive with summer. Soft clusters of hydrangeas bloomed in shades of blue and pink, their petals trembling under the breeze. Strings of warm fairy lights glowed above the arbor, swaying gently with the evening air. The faint notes of a piano drifted across the lawn, not the grand stage of a concert hall, but a simple melody played by a hired pianist, soft enough to let voices carry, strong enough to fill the silence. This wasn't the kind of wedding people expected of Nathaniel Hayes and Isabella Reed. There were no flashing cameras, no red carpets, no tabloids pressing in like vultures. There were only a handful of friends, a scattering of staff, and the butler who had served Nathaniel his entire life, standing quietly at the edge with proud, misted eyes. I stood before the mirror inside the small dressing room, my breath shallow. The dress shimmered like a memory because it was the very same gown Nathaniel had once painted in that hidden apartment, down to the tiniest detail. The bodice hugged my waist, the fabric flowing into a sweep of white silk that gleamed under the light. I had never worn a wedding dress before, not for our cold transactional union, not for the loveless year that followed. But now it fit like it had always been waiting for me. A soft knock came at the door. Isabella. Nathaniel's voice. Low, careful, waited. My heart leapt. I opened the door. He stood there in a simple black suit, his tie slightly loosened, his cane polished until it gleamed. The evening sun painted him in gold, catching on the sharp lines of his face, softening the steel in his eyes. For a moment he just stared at me, his lips parting soundlessly. Finally he whispered, "You look exactly like the painting." And? I asked, my voice trembling. His throat worked, his eyes shimmering. And more. We didn't need anyone to walk us down the aisle. We walked together side by side, every step in unison. The ceremony was simple. A few words from the officiant, quiet gasps from the guests. But when it came time for vows, Nathaniel turned to me, his hands shaking as they closed over mine. "I used to think I wasn't worthy of happiness," he said, his voice breaking. "That love was something meant for other people, not for me. But you," his breath caught, his lashes trembling. "You make me want to live. Every day. Every moment. I don't know if I can promise perfection. I don't know if I can promise I won't stumble. But I can promise this: I'll stay. As long as you'll have me, Isabella, I'll stay." My vision blurred with tears. I squeezed his hands, drawing strength from the warmth of his palms. "I used to think marriage was a prison," I admitted. "A burden I had to carry for my family's sake. I thought you hated me. I thought we were nothing but strangers bound by paper. I was wrong. You were there all along, loving me in silence. And I was too blind to see it." I lifted my chin, smiling through the tears. "So here's my vow: I won't look away again. Not from you. Not from us. I'll fight for you every time you forget your worth. I'll remind you every single day that you are loved completely always. That's my promise, Nathaniel Hayes." By the time the officiant declared us husband and wife, neither of us could hold back the tears. When we kissed, it wasn't the tentative brush of lips that marked our first awkward union. It wasn't the desperate breaking kiss of two people clinging to what little time they thought they had left. It was a kiss of choosing, of claiming, of finally being whole. The reception was laughter and music, clinking glasses and soft toasts. But I barely heard any of it. I only heard his quiet chuckles when I teased him. I only saw the way his eyes never left me, as if he still couldn't believe I was real. Later, when the guests departed and the lights dimmed, Nathaniel and I slipped away from the crowd. The night was clear, the sky a velvet expanse scattered with stars. We sat together on the garden steps, my head resting against his shoulder, his hand warm around mine. "Do you remember," he said softly, "how I used to watch the stars alone?" I nodded. I had seen it in the butler's stories, in the lonely boy Nathaniel once was, hiding on rooftops, searching for light in the darkness. "You don't have to anymore," I whispered. He turned his head, pressing a kiss to my temple. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of our old life. It was a quiet filled with peace, with the steady rhythm of two heartbeats beating in time. He looked up at the stars again, then down at me, and for once I saw it. Not fear, not hesitation, but belief. And in that moment I knew we had rewritten the story. Nathaniel Hayes, the boy who had once stood in the shadows, who had once believed he was unworthy of love, would never stand alone again. Because I, Isabella Reed, would be beside him. Boys. The world would still gossip. The tabloids would still spin their lies. We would still argue, still stumble, still fight through the jagged edges of life. But it didn't matter. Because in this imperfect, messy, beautiful reality, he was mine. And I was his. Forever. The end.